Larry tried to kill me.
Yeah. I was so thoroughly disgusted.
I mean, think about it. Why does it make you special to do what you do?
Packers jumping around. They rush 4. Plenty of time for John. Now squeezes, steps up in the pocket. LA can run inside the 10. Head first. He dives off the 5-yard line. My goodness.
Rushing 4, ball comes out of the hands of Newton. It's on the ground and still on the ground. Picked up by T.J. Ward at the 4-yard line.
There's also Brian Clady and Bob Miller. Third and long 3. Going deep. Oh, and he's got Thomas. Goodbye. Touchdown.
Here we go. First snap of the overtime. The Broncos have been in 3 overtime games this year. They won them all. Got him at the 40. It's Thomas at the 50. Stiff arm got him. Green to the 30. To the 20. Thomas to the 10. Denver's going on to New England. They win it on the first play of overtime.
And what's up, everybody? Welcome to episode of the 50 podcast. I'm your host, Mundungus Creevey. As always, with my co-host Glenn Hauser, Mr. Boggins, or Russell Wilson, whichever, and Mr. Cameron Parker. And we have a very, very special guest for you today. He's been on numerous times, and we have him on yet again because he's such a fantastic person to have on the show. He is the co-host of the Touchdown Denver podcast. This man has conquered college football. He's conquered the NFL. He's conquered radio, social media. He can say toy boat 5 times fast. He's conquered ninjas and the cinnamon challenge. Ladies and gentlemen, Nick Ferguson on the show today. What's up, buddy?
Wow. that was amazing. I have to say, Mr. Boggins, when you first came back, I was like, is that Russell Wilson? You know, how did they pull that off?
He wasn't busy at all.
No. So obviously the big news going around Broncos country and the Denver Broncos is Coach Hackett has been let go as the head coach. Now, first things first, we never cheer for anyone to lose their job. So we want to thank Coach Hackett for everything he did for the Denver Broncos. Wish him well. Hope he succeeds anywhere he goes. But Nick, I kind of want to get your perspective as a player when a coach gets let go or there's a change in coaching staff. How is the locker room dealing with that?
Well, it all depends on where you are from a player standpoint. Were you a supporter of that coach, or were you a guy that could not wait until that person was fired? So it's not something that you want to celebrate, whether you're a player or a fan, because I don't like it when people get fired, because I think about just the human side of them and the fact that they have families. But at the same time, I would have to say at UC Health Training Facility, there are a couple of guys who are kind of waving a small little flag in victory because they didn't really see eye to eye with everything that Coach Hackett, wanted to present from an offensive standpoint. And when you listen to George Paton and Greg Penner today at the press conference, they wanted to have someone come in that was going to instill a certain level of leadership and accountability, because once again, we all had to painstakingly suffer through, the nightmare on Christmas Day, watching the Rams, pile up 51 points on the Broncos. I mean, they had their breaking point watching the outcome of the game, watching what happened with Dalton Reisner and Brett Rippon on the sideline, and then Randy Gregory and the incident that took place off the field. They just had enough, because it was kind of a national embarrassment. So now Broncos country find themselves searching for yet a new head coach.
I mean, let's be honest. Like it was just first of all very rough. Second of all, you're trying to present your new team audience, and your brother-in-law is sitting across from you, and this is the show you're going to put on. Like I get that they wanted to have Hackett throughout the year, but after that, like in the sideline, it was just the perfect storm. I mean, come on. There's no way you get through that. Unfortunately for Hackett, like obviously we thank you for your time. Thank you for just everything.
Thoughts and prayers.
T's and P's.
Well, guys, believe it or not, I mean, if it wasn't for that poor display nationally, Hackett would have 2 more weeks to actually try to save his job. That was kind of what Greg Penner said today. But after that display, he couldn't go back, because you're absolutely right. When you're sitting in that press box and you're sitting next to, Stan Kroenke, a team that just won a Super Bowl despite the team being 4-10, yeah, it's going to stick in your craw a little bit, because he's just going to look down at you and say, hey, is this the team you just purchased? Good luck with that.
So Nick, I was listening to the guys on KOA yesterday afterwards, and Dave Logan said something very interesting. He mentioned that someone who still works for the team, someone higher up, so he didn't reference who exactly it was, in February told Dave that I don't think Nathaniel Hackett knows what he's doing. That far back. Did you have your doubts about him, or were you optimistic that things would work out under his leadership?
No, I mean, there was a lot of things that happened in his tenure with his team, but the first time that I realized that there was something wrong was go back to the Monday Night Football game, right? You look at the clock management situations and trying to figure out what to do. Do we kick it? Do we go for it? And then saying it's a 4th and 5, not allowing Russell Wilson, who's making his return back to Seattle, to even make an attempt. You decided to allow Brandon McManus to attempt a long field goal, something that I didn't think that was in his range. And then 3 weeks later, now you have to go out and hire an outside consultant, and Jerry Rosberg, who's now the interim head coach. And that was week 3, right? That was indicators that there was an issue, because you make those adjustments to your coaching staff when you're putting it together. There's seldom do you see in NFL where coaches are making adjustments to their coaching staff mid-season. So that said a lot to why I felt as though Coach Hackett wasn't ready for this position. But it begs a bigger question. What did Hackett say in the meeting with the 6 people that he met with and convinced them that he was the guy instead of the other 9 prospects?
Yeah. So to fast forward, obviously, say the next few months, and when the Broncos are hiring their head coach, I actually tweeted this on my Twitter handle just to get like the Broncos country's reaction. But for you, Nick, when you look at a head coaching candidate, and especially with everything, with Hackett bringing like that energetic side that we kind of saw, and then he was trying to be about as positive as well. But unfortunately with that, you mentioned about the discipline. That was one of the qualities that unfortunately it seemed like it was lacking with this team. So with you, when you're looking at it from a head coaching perspective, what is one quality that you want a head coach to have for the Denver Broncos?
Well, someone who could come in and instill accountability. When we go back to Vic Fangio, we didn't have accountability with him. And he's had more experience than the previous 2 guys as far as how long he's coached in the NFL. And I'm talking about Vance Joseph and Hackett included. So you want someone who comes in right away, day 1, and he establishes from the ground that, hey, this is what it's going to be like. What I saw last year with all those penalties, that's not going to happen. Because if you do that, I don't care how much money you make it, when they drafted you, this ownership has given me the resources where we can kind of let you go. So the Broncos are at that position where they can do that for anyone on the roster, with the exception of one person, and that's Russell Wilson, because of how his contract is structured. But when it comes to everyone else, if you're going to continue to play undisciplined football, And we're talking about not just the penalties, we're talking about the penalties overall. The post-snap penalties, the pre-snap penalties, not being able to protect your quarterback. If you can do the basic things to keep your job, then guess what? You get fired. I mean, just think about anyone else in any other occupation. You don't do your job, you get fired. And I was just talking to Rod Smith about this when I was on the Sports Zoo, and it's all important to kind of realize with these players. See, they don't have the fear, in my opinion, of losing their job. And don't get me wrong, I like Nathaniel Hackett. I mean, we had great conversations, but it didn't seem as though those guys were fearful of losing their job when they making mistakes. And I'm not saying that guys need to walk around on eggshell, but you need to have fear of loss of your job for you to get out there and do your job well.
Now, Nick, I know we got you for just a little bit of time. You got time for a couple more questions?
Absolutely. We'll go to 6:30.
Cool. So you mentioned a little bit about the scuffle that Dalton Reisner and Brett Rippon had on the sidelines. How does it get to that point? How do players get to the point where they're turning on each other and pushing each other? And also, Latavius Murray is huge. Like, he stepped up to Dalton Reisner, and good God, like, I think he was bigger. But how does it get to that point where players are pushing each other?
Well, it's losing. Like, we saw Mike Purcell chirp at Russell Wilson in the Carolina Panthers game, right? And usually there is kind of a divide as far as offense and defense, and usually that's where you see it. But you never see two offensive guys actually go at it, and more importantly, an offensive lineman and the quarterback. But to me, things have reached a tipping point, and Brett Rippon was coming to the aid of, Russell Wilson, but also his own personal aid, because when you look at this offensive line, both of those quarterbacks, when they have played, they have been under heavy duress, right? When you look at Russell last game, 11 hits, 6 sacks. The week before, you look at Brett Rippon, I think he had about 9 hits, 4 sacks. The week before that, Russell Wilson, 11 hits, 4 sacks. So if you picking up on what I'm putting down, this is why Brett Rippon went over to the offensive line. Not Dalton Reisner. He went over to the offensive line. But like they said when I was a kid, a hit dog will holler. And basically what happened by Rippon going over there and say, hey, you need to pick up your quarterback. What Reisner heard was him saying something about giving up sacks. That's not what Rippon said. So if that's what you heard, you already knew that, guess what? You were giving up too many sacks, and you were upset that was happening. And a backup quarterback was calling you out, because say what you want to say about Russ. Russ doesn't call people out. That's the last thing he was doing. So Brett Rippon decided, you know what? Russ is not going to do it. I'm going to do it myself.
So, Nick, breaking news. You were just hired as the head coach of the Broncos, and it's now your responsibility to have the conversation with Russell that he loses the office, the 6 or so reserve parking spaces for his team, and any of those other perks that none of the other players have. Walk me through that conversation.
Don't waste time, though, like Hackett did, because now it's just weird.
Well, I would say to him, bro, Russ, I know it said that it's a quarterback-driven league, but the quarterback doesn't just drive this engine of this team. It is a team, and we have to think with, one mind and one unit. With that being said, we're going to have to make a couple of changes around here. I'm letting you know before we make these changes. Now, I'm not kind of forced to make you, or I'm not obligated to let you know what we're doing. But because I respect you as a player, what you've done in this league, well, I'm going to tell you this. Now, I understand your team is really key to your level of success, and I respect that. For that, we're going to reduce your parking spaces from 6 to 2. You figure out who you're going to have on that extra parking space, but we need to make sure that we are galvanized as a team, and there is no separation between you and other players. So I'm letting you know this is what we're going to do. And oh, by the way, we're looking into bringing in Brian Schottenheimer as our offensive coordinator. You worked with him in Seattle before, so hopefully you guys can get along, because we need to get this team back on track. And if for some reason you guys can't get along, you guys figure it out, because the only thing we care about is W's.
Perfect.
So How do you guys like that? Do I still keep the job? I keep the job.
I was speechless. I didn't know what to say.
You got somebody trying to convert one of his 14 bathrooms at his home into his home office.
Wait a minute. What is it with everyone in his bathrooms and how many he has at home?
Too many.
Who
the amount of rooms though? Like, what do you need 14 bathrooms for if you have like 5 people? What do you need 14 bathrooms for?
Well, just in case you can't get to the bathroom that's closest to your room, right? You don't want anyone relieving themselves right on the floor. Now you have to clean that up.
That's why you just do Julian Edelman, Wes Welker, and just do the Depends commercials, and then you get 3 Depends, and then you can just. That's what you got. Sometimes
it wasn't the bathrooms that struck me. It was only a 4-bedroom house. I'm like, wait a minute.
Though.
Hey, listen, once again, like you said, I mean, he never sleeps. He could be sleepwalking, and hey, you need the nearest bathroom to walk into.
This is why you're the new coach. I have a question about what do you think of Penner being the one that's really heading up this new coaching search? Like, do you think that's an overstep, or do you think that's a good accountability move for him and Peyton's relationship?
I think it's really important for a group of individuals who are only used to dealing in a corporate space, because let's be totally honest, corporate America and NFL, they seem like they're the same thing, but they're not. Because in football, you have to know football, and you have to be able to talk the language and being able to relate to certain individuals. So having the coach report to you directly, that's now showing a level of accountability. Now, I do believe that it puts George in a tough spot, because now if the head coach is reporting to the owner, you're developing certain relationships that you can now cut George Payton out of the mix. Now, I would say that it would be wise for them to do that, and hopefully he's still involved, because here's what I know based on my experience. I've seen head coaches come in and they've had success, and now they want to be the head coach and the GM. That's too many hats, because who is put in place to tell you no when you want to make a certain personnel move either for or against the roster? You need to have somewhat of a buffer. So hopefully they include George Payton in the process of selecting new head coach, and they don't usurp his power by saying, hey, listen, the coach is going to get whatever he wants, because if you do that, that's a recipe for disaster.
So obviously a very obvious question that you'll probably be asked, if not 1,000 times already on Twitter, is, who is maybe your preferred candidate, or a candidate for the head coaching position? Obviously, rumors have been swirling. I can't talk. Swirling.
Swirling?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
When you snorkel in a circle.
Yeah, exactly. But when rumors were swirling, when Hackett had left, a few names, obviously, of Jim Harbaugh and Sean Payton, obviously, kind of go through your list. I know I asked you earlier about, the qualities that maybe you want to look for in a head coach, but who are some of the guys that are on the top of your, we'll just say, I know Christmas is gone, but Christmas tree wish list for a head coach?
Well, the first guy was Sean Payton, and I know he comes with a hefty price as far as how much you're going to have to pay him. The Saints still own his rights, so you may have to give up a couple of draft picks or a player to entice them to move away and allow Coach Payton to actually come to Denver. But the reason why I like him is because I just look at what he has done in his tenure with the Saints. They have been in the playoffs for a while. They play competitive football. He took a quarterback that was short of 6 feet and just helped him expand his career in Drew Brees. I feel as though he could do the same thing with Russell Wilson, because when you look at where the game is now, this is why they prop the quarterback up so much. It is a lot about how far can you get the ball down the field in the vertical passing game. And you just look at some of those Saints games. Drew Brees didn't have a lot of household names, but I mean, he was putting up like 5,000-yard seasons. If Russell can do that, now he's getting back to being Russell of old. And the first thing Sean Payton did when he took over that Saints team was he addressed the offensive line, right? And that is an area that really concerns me for this Broncos team, and even concerns me with these last 2 games, how poor that offensive line has played. So Sean Payton would be number 1. Now, I would say my 1B would be Dan Quinn. He has a relationship with George Payton. They go back to their days with the Miami Dolphins, and he was kind of a leading guy in the clubhouse before Nathaniel Hackett, got that opportunity to be the Broncos head coach. And then here's something else. Brian Schottenheimer, I mentioned him earlier. He's down there as like a kind of a consultant or game analyst for the Dallas Cowboys. So those two have already worked together in Dallas. They worked together in Seattle. So coming here to Denver, they will be on the same page. And oh, by the way, both guys are quite familiar with Russell Wilson. And when you look at Russell Wilson's stats over his years with the Seattle Seahawks, I think from 2011 to 2017, I think Brian Schottenheimer was the offensive coordinator. And Russ, I mean, when you're talking about letting Russ cook, he really cooked under Brian Schottenheimer. And that was the thing that Nathaniel Hackett sold the bill of goods to George Payton on. Hey, I'm going to come in and I'm going to change this offense. It didn't happen. Now you get a guy who's familiar with Russ, who Russ is familiar with. And to me, it would be a perfect combination, but we still would have to see how that would work out long term.
So Bubba Gonzalez has kind of a question about Jerry Rosburg. He wants to know, what do we need to know about Jerry? And then Jerry was the game management, consultant or whatever. But to add on to that, I kind of want to ask, what do we need to know about him, and why did Evero turn down the interim coach and they gave it to Jerry Rosburg?
Well, I'll start with the last question first. The reason why Coach Evero kind of turned it down, it was a couple of things. One, his loyalty to Nathaniel Hackett. I mean, these two guys played in college football together, and they said, hey, if the other one gets a job, I'm going to hire you. And that was the case. Evero doesn't become a defensive coordinator for the Broncos if Hackett doesn't bring him on. So there's a certain loyalty that's there as well. But also, Evero wanted to focus on just kind of closing out the season from a defensive standpoint. He's definitely going to receive a lot of interviews, or should receive a lot of interviews as coaches are fired. And he just wanted to make sure that his resume is what it needs to be, because after that drubbing, that 51-14 drubbing, he wants to show his other suitors that he is more than capable of rebounding from that situation. So if he now becomes the interim head coach, he's now spread thin on a staff that doesn't have Dwayne Stoops. You don't have Butch Berry. So why put yourself in that position? Now, as far as Rosburg is considered, well, Rosburg, was kind of in this similar role with the Baltimore Ravens, and he was a special teams coach. So he's going to be able to help out on the special team side of things, where Dwayne Stoops would have kind of handled those duties and those responsibilities. So what helps is that Rosburg has been here since week 3, and the guys would kind of respect him from that standpoint. Now, how much would he be able to hold the guys accountable? Well, we'll see after the Kansas City game how well that worked out. But that's pretty much what his role is at this moment. He's just a stopgap to the next head coach is put in place.
Yeah, no. Nick, we got like 3 more minutes with you, so I just want to kind of close out with another comment question from Bronco Bill, who's got a show on the network on Fridays. He wants to know if we should consider drafting a quarterback this offseason or next offseason.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, playing for Mike Shanahan, being around Kyle Shanahan, and playing for Bill Parcells, it was all about bringing in adequate competition. You're never really settled in the NFL when you're a starter anyway. So they're constantly bringing guys in to just kind of keep you sharp. And not knowing, what we have seen from Russell Wilson thus far, was it just the offensive line? Was it the lack of chemistry? Was it the play calling? We don't know. I don't believe that a guy just kind of falls off a year after being removed from his prior team. But you need to kind of prepare for the future. And I know most people talk about, the starting quarterback as being the most important guy. I would go as far as to say the backup quarterback is just as important. And some teams, you don't realize it till your starter actually goes down, and you're just kind of scouring the waiver wire trying to find a guy to kind of, fill the gap. So it would be wise for the Broncos to draft a quarterback, something that they haven't really been successful with over the past couple of years, because most of their quarterbacks that they picked up have been other people's quarterbacks, with the exception of Tim Tebow. So drafting a guy, developing him, having the right offensive coordinator and the right players around him, that gives you an option if you run it back with Russell in 2023, and you're seeing, okay, well, Russ is showing signs of just that, no pun intended, Russ. No. So now we have another quarterback in waiting. So yeah, it would be a smart decision.
So if I just want to add, if you're a fan of Nick like we are, check out the latest Cut, Traded, Fired, Retired podcast with Susie Wargin. Talks about Nick's journey, his whole life. It's an incredible discussion. I loved it. That was awesome. So I highly recommend that anyone who has a free half hour, 45 minutes to spend, check it out, because it's definitely worth your time.
Well, I really appreciate that. And when Susie asked me to do it, at first I was a little hesitant, but I said, well, maybe if I tell my story, somehow it would help someone out there, because my story isn't just one about football. It's just about overcoming adversity. And we all have our challenges in our own ways, whether it's from working or our family structure. But it's just one of those things that I wanted to just kind of inspire people, and hopefully did through my story, to just let them know, even though things may seem that they're not going your way, that doesn't necessarily mean they have to stay that way. You just have to continue to surge forward. And just like the title of the show, fired and retired and traded. I mean, I've been traded, I've been fired, and obviously I am retired. But when you're fired, it is an emotional roller coaster for you, especially when it's unexpected. And I've had that happen to me. And the one thing that you cannot do is succumb to being fired and allow what someone else, the limitations that they put on you, to just kind of make you surrender. So hopefully, once again, everyone is just kind of inspired. And I just want to say to all your listeners, hopefully you had a happy holidays. The New Year's coming up. I don't make New Year's resolutions, but I just hope whatever you decide to do in the new year is something positive. So stay safe.
Well, Nick, we once again want to thank you so much for being on the show. We bow to your knowledge. You are incredible. And for anybody who put a comment or a question in there and I didn't get to it, go ahead and hit Nick up on Twitter at Nick Ferguson _25. He is never shy about sharing his opinion, so go ahead and ask away. You can also listen to him on at TD Denver Pod, the Touchdown Denver podcast. You can listen to that everywhere it's available. Again,
wait! Don't forget now. I will be back on the Sports Zoo tomorrow and Thursday. So if you want to tune in for that, please tune in, text into the show. And as you're saying, hey, we answer all questions.
There you go. Once again, thank you so much for joining us. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year's, and hopefully the Broncos go up from here.
Well, you can't go down.
Yeah, he's right.
Yeah,
right.
Careful.
Oh, yeah, that's
Careful.
facts. You can't. Yeah, that's right.
All right, guys, be good.
Appreciate
it. Oh, it's all.
He's right. He's right. We can't go further down.
Come on, potentially.
Yeah, if it goes any further down than what we certainly have encountered the last several years.
What's the point?
I mean, it's funny. I was on the Crush Pod, and they asked me if the Broncos more in a dip or was it a dive? Dip or a dive? I don't remember. It was a dip or a decline. Decline. It was dip or decline. And I said dip because they couldn't. This was before the Rams game, because they, I thought you couldn't get much worse, right? Yeah, You couldn't get much worse. And I was like, Russell, I think he's in a dip because he's so far down in the valley right now that he has to be at the very bottom, and he has to be coming up a little. He wasn't. He still had a couple miles down to go. I was wrong. but maybe it's still.
Well, and I think like out of all of the things that has happened to the Denver Broncos this season, the biggest surprise of that Rams game was the defense. Like, where did it go? Like, we're a top 3 defense in the NFL and then 51 points. Where did that come from?
They cared about as much as Broncos country. They were just like, you know what? I'm over it. I'm gonna go sit on the couch and eat Doritos and cry.
I was at least expecting the defense to keep it close. That wasn't it at all.
See, I just thought about something. What if it's Evero's secret plan? Secret plan, like I'm his best friend. I'm his best friend, man. I would never, I'm not even gonna come in as interim. Oh, shoot. My defense just gave up 51 points. That's crazy, dog.
Is this
you got fired? Shoot. No, I'm totally not going to come in as interim, but I'm going to interview for full time, though.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, did you notice Peyton said we hope to talk to him? I was like, oh boy.
That was his whole plan the whole time was get it so that Hackett was let go, convince Hackett to go someplace warmer, and then Evero could be like, it's too damn cold. I'm coming with you.
He literally looked in the camera when he said it. He's like, and we hope to get Evero.
That was the easiest question of the press conference. Is like, are there any coaches currently on the staff that you want to interview? Yeah, just that one guy.
Well, you guys. I was just gonna say, you guys were mentioning about Hackett going somewhere warmer. If he goes back to Green Bay, I wouldn't exactly call that place warmer.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
I don't know. Last week. But yeah, not only was Nathaniel Hackett let go, but Butch Berry and Dwayne Stukes was let go. And a lot of people were surprised at Dwayne Stukes. But I'm not surprised that Dwayne Stukes was let go. I'm surprised he was let go then. That was a little surprising. Because it's like if you're having an interim head coach, you would keep the coordinators normally, right? Like, was it that bad that he had to get? I know it was like 32nd in the NFL.
It was terrible. I mean,
but it's not like we're not used to that at this point. So was it like Stukes being let go that early was a little surprising?
Yeah, I don't know. It's one of those things like, you already took off the Band-Aid with Hackett. You might as well, rip off the other Band-Aids of, maybe some of the other struggling units on the team. Obviously, Butch Berry, as we all know, because we talked about it ad nauseum, how the Broncos should have kept Mike Munchak and they decided to hire Butch Berry. And frankly, they decided to hire all coaches with no head coaching experience, more importantly. But, with Dwayne Stukes, that was a little bit of a bummer. You had kind of high hopes for the guy at the beginning of the season, and to see where it's gone down, especially with Brandon McManus and even some of the punt returns and stuff like that. Yeah, it has definitely been pretty sore for sure.
Yeah, and the Butch Berry thing was pretty obvious. Like, I've even heard that some of the linemen, like most of the linemen, don't even like him. So I am not surprised that, like, just all around they were probably just like, this didn't work out. You know what I mean? Let's just cut ties. I fully expect. I don't know how the hell Outen is still there.
Yeah.
No.
What does he do?
But I don't know what he does. I don't know what he does. He is there.
Would you like some high quality H2O?
I think he is amongst the team or amongst the coaches when they write up the plays for the script, the plays for the week.
He holds the pens.
I don't think. He's like the beard. He doesn't say much,
The only thing that I can possibly decipher is that he has a tight end coach within his background, and with the emergence that we've seen, with Greg Dulcich maybe, and the emergence of him. That's the only thing. That's the only thing I can think of. But I'm trying to act smart and think like I know, why Outen is there, and it's still not working.
Yeah.
So we were talking about the Dalton pushing in that whole video that's gone crazy. Does that kill his chances at Walter Payton Man of the Year? I mean, he probably didn't have much of a shot.
I mean,
not being a big name, but that's gotta
I mean,
really hurt his contention, wouldn't you think?
More importantly, I don't think he had a chance to win it, but it was, just a really bad look overall. And we love Dalton. We certainly still love him as a person and everything he stands for. Unfortunately, just emotions got the best of him there. Even for Randy Gregory, emotions got the best of Randy Gregory, and we saw how that unfolded and then resulted in a 1-game suspension. But like for Dalton, his emotions got the best of him. That's not exactly, or that's not even how you want a Walter Payton Man of the Year to look. So he didn't necessarily, probably was not going to win that one. But more importantly, that's probably the door that opens him out on the way out as far as not returning to Denver.
I just thought about what would be really funny is if I want to get like candid camera of like Peyton going to Outon, just as a prank, and telling him that he's calling the plays this next week.
No, he's the interim head coach.
Yeah, I just want out to be, but he's just trying to hide in the closet.
So obviously we've talked about head coaches before, but now that it's actually happened and we're looking for a head coach, I keep hearing about Sean Payton, and Nick even talked about it. Do we actually have a shot at getting Sean Payton? I keep being told like he's not interested in Denver. We don't have the capital to get him. Why is his name so big in Denver?
Because it's the biggest name out there. That's why.
Right.
Like, and we need a coach. It's the biggest name out there. It's the allure of it.
He doesn't have a job either.
Yeah, and I will say that I wouldn't put any coach out of the options because of the bank account of our owner currently.
Yeah.
Like it will be a blank check.
Yeah.
It will be a lot of money. I will not be surprised if the next coach, if it is a big enough name, could potentially be the highest paid coach in the NFL.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
However, I think one of the least likely is Sean Payton. I think he just bought a house in LA. I think he wants one of the LA jobs. Will one of those come about? I don't know. Sean McVay would have to retire, or Staley would have to get fired, but it looks like the Chargers are going to be making the playoffs, so that might not be happening. I've also heard that Arizona is a possibility as well.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't, and also the draft capital. Like we don't have. Mm-hmm. I mean, unless we give up. I don't even know what you would have to give up for him. Maybe I would hope not a first. I don't know. I don't know what you'd have to give it for him. I don't think George Payton would want to give up one of his 6 picks this year to get Sean Payton. Don't think that's going to happen.
Well, and
the Jim Harbaugh thing,
yes,
that's been picking up steam.
Okay. So I think it is also unlikely. However, I think that it is going to be very interesting because now Condoleezza Rice is involved.
Yep.
I also think the blank check thing is involved. I also think that because Greg Penner during the presser today had said that they want to have a coach in here that has a lot of influence, a lot of say. Like he wants them to be to really be a part of the whole situation. I also think that if Michigan happens to win the Natty, that may play into it as well.
But how does Jim Harbaugh work with George Payton?
That's the question.
It sounds like George Payton is safe. Like he's not going anywhere. So if you bring in a Jim Harbaugh or a Sean Payton, because at least for me, it sounds like they're having Payton focus more on roster management, not so much coaching or just the roster management side of it. So if Jim Harbaugh comes in and he wants some say over roster management, how does that work with George Payton?
Well,
I think that's all in the interview. Sorry. Go for it.
Oh, no, what I was going to say is if you saw Payton when that press conference first started, he was shaky. I mean, it was interesting. Normally he's very poised. And he was flubbing his lines, didn't seem very smooth. It's obvious like he's feeling the pressure. I think if Jim Harbaugh came in and said, I want to be I might want to make final decision on personnel. We can have a staff, including George, but I make the final say. Penner is going to say yes. And, if you listen to what they said, they talked about they want a CEO type. And with that, I almost believe that all but eliminates any first-time head coach from getting this job. They, like Marcus said, they have a blank check, and they want to make a big splash. I think it's going to be. I mean, the Harbaugh, it's getting more interesting to think about. He only makes $7 million a year at Michigan. His buyout is just over $2 million, which is crazy. So if he chose to leave, he'd only owe like $2.25 million or something along those lines.
Yeah.
So, and one more thing to add is he thought he was going to get either the Vikings or the Raiders job last year. So he is still looking to leave for the NFL. I think he's the guy you think about the most, and we wouldn't have to give up anything to get him.
Yeah, and I think that, like indirectly, again, this is just maybe creating rumors, but like indirectly, maybe him being interested in the Vikings is maybe a subtle thing that maybe he would have enjoyed working with Peyton. Now, Peyton obviously wasn't with the Vikings, last year when Harbaugh was, at least interested in them. But who knows? You can kind of speculate all you want till the dogs come home on that one. But with Sean Payton, I think it's still a little bit fascinating on even both of them. And for the money thing, it's going to be a big thing. And for the Saints' perspective, I don't know. I mean, like they also may feel not so emotionally tied to Sean Payton anymore, to where if we're going to talk, say the deal in place for the Broncos to acquire Sean Payton, they could also be of the impression that, hey, we're grateful for the time that you had. We're grateful for the time that you gave us in New Orleans. You gave us a Super Bowl championship. You gave us, everything to this franchise. And then, hey, we're going to allow you the opportunity to pursue another head coaching career. And then with that, we'll be able to acquire a draft capital, a draft pick or whatever of, any, of anything really. And so I think his contract is up in 2024. So, I mean, like they could, get maybe like a 2024 pick, not necessarily a 2023 pick. So it just all depends on what the compensation would be, but I'm sure they could sign him to any deal.
Set that in the middle of the show. Okay, so I'm looking at Bet Online's odds for the next Broncos head coach, right? I think you can probably rule out 3, I think, pretty safely. I think Eric Bieniemy is not going to happen. Kellen Moore, probably not going to happen. And Brian Flores won't happen until his court thing is done. So I think those 3 you can automatically say no. No. I know Kamani talked about Eric B., but I think Eric Bieniemy in Denver will forever be a no.
Honestly, I don't even know if he gets a head coaching gig in general. Just with all the stuff that we're hearing from, he doesn't interview well. Of course, he has the backstories, of the arrests, the numerous arrests and everything. So yeah, I don't foresee him being a possibility. I will say though, there are some fascinating names. Well, go ahead and continue your list, Mike, if you're going to continue.
So you got Dan Quinn in there. You've got Jim Caldwell, who's one I didn't even think of when they started listing off head coaches. Shane Steichen, D'Amico Ryans, Frank Reich, Ejiro Evero, Jim Harbaugh, and Leslie Frazier. And then they have Byron Leftwich. But I don't see Byron Leftwich. No. I mean, I'm not going to say absolutely no, but.
Jim Caldwell should never have been let go by the Lions. I mean, he had brought them to the playoffs 3 out of 4 seasons there.
And
just get tons. No, he was the Lions coach, and I believe they dumped him for Matt Patricia, if I'm correct on that. But I mean, that guy should not. Yeah, he was perfect for that team. Who's done great is Steve Wilkes. Yeah, at Carolina. I heard an interesting sidebar to that is that he had joined the lawsuit with Brian Flores and the Broncos are a defendant in that. So that pretty much eliminates him from contention from the Broncos job because there's litigation in which the Broncos are involved. I had not heard that. But I mean, I think he deserves a fair shot at the Panthers. I mean, they have a very good opportunity to win that division, make the playoffs.
Well, and that's where it gets interesting because, like, if you listen to Ben Albright at all, he
Pull
said,
Kamani's up while you're talking.
Said, which one? Kamani, this one?
Gosh, that would be amazing.
My time for Pittsburgh, he's not going anywhere.
Well, I mean, I doubt it, but I will say, as far as with Tomlin, he won obviously against the Raiders, but he is on track right now to still keep the track record that he has, which is not have a losing record at all in his tenure with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And this season would be the most incredible.
Did they win this weekend?
Yeah,
they did. Yeah,
they did. They're 7-8
on that last play. Remember, it was last minute. Yeah.
So they got to win out. But yeah, like Benjamin Albright, what did you send now? Benjamin Albright sent the. Oh God. Sorry, we have a group text and Boggins is sending pictures in it. Now I forgot my train of thought. Oh, Benjamin Albright was talking about interim coaches and how most teams or all teams don't really hire their interim head coach. That's just kind of a thing that doesn't happen. So it kind of makes you wonder, like, if Ejiro Evero was Denver's first pick for interim head coach, how serious are they actually going to take the interview with Evero?
Well, here's a twist. So, and this is about Sean Payton, right? So, news broke with Sean Payton that Vic Fangio is a possible tie-in with Sean Payton to be the defensive coordinator on his staff. I will say though, I think that if you're looking at the Broncos job, I still very much think that it would still be really enticing. If you're Sean Payton looking at that job, because you would almost have a younger head coach that runs basically the same scheme that Vic Fangio runs, just a little bit more advanced of it, I should say. But you'd have a younger coach, a coach that you can certainly work for or work with. So and maybe in a lot of ways, like what he had with Dennis Allen, right, as a young defensive-minded coach before he took the Denver Broncos job. So I think it would be pretty tempting for Payton, that if he took the Broncos job, that Ejiro Evero might still stay on with Sean Payton.
Well, and wouldn't that be the same with Jim Harbaugh though too? Like Evero could potentially stay as defensive coordinator.
I mean, I think any head coach that comes in, unless they already have their guy that they want to bring in,
Payton,
I think it's going to be pretty alluring to potentially bring back Ejiro Evero because the defense is solid. Like you wouldn't have to change much. I think that is very possible that a coach would come in and just be like, if you're Harbaugh, you come in, and if you don't have a specific guy that you immediately want, there's your dude. He's still under contract. So
yeah, and I think that was one of the other drawbacks of Sean Payton was he came out with this list of coaches that he's bringing on as his coaching team, and Vic Fangio was his defensive coordinator. Vic Fangio back in Denver is a no-go.
But that's why I think the Evero thing is fascinating to me with as far as a layer of that.
Yeah, right, but
then you've got to ask yourself, like, if Vic Fangio is the defensive coordinator that Sean Payton wants, is he willing to not have him as defensive coordinator and go with Evero? Or would he rather just take a job somewhere else?
And that's what I'm trying to say is that he would not have Vic Fangio as his defensive coordinator or even on the staff at all, that he would go with a much younger defensive-minded coach, keep the scheme intact, which is about the same of Vic Fangio's, and so just the cohesiveness would be there and it would be an easy transition for him.
So I don't know who like all of your choices for head coaches. I'm going with the same coach I wanted last year. I still like Dan Quinn. A lot of people are saying, well, you don't pick Dan Quinn and Brian Schottenheimer just to fix Russ because that's not that's not the main thing you're supposed to do. You got to look forward to the future as well. But at the same time, like you're going to be building the team around the scheme that Russ fits with. So even if you don't have Russ, you still have the same scheme. So why not still have Dan Quinn and Brian Schottenheimer? But I like Dan Quinn for head coach, just like I did last offseason.
Yeah.
I mean, I've pounded the table for Shane Steichen a bunch. I would, or Frank Reich. Still there. One of those two, draft Anthony Richardson. Chaos.
Do you think Reich is a big enough name at this point to satisfy what Penner's trying to accomplish? And
hit me with that. Fair. I do think Penner is trying to just create a juggernaut, something that'll really splash. And I guess Frank Reich wouldn't really do that, but
the thing that would be tempting for me with Frank Reich, if he wants to kind of make it, I guess, a little bit of power, talking about Penner, would be maybe giving Frank Reich the alternative of maybe having Jim Caldwell on his staff as offensive coordinator. Some kind of like throwing that wrinkle into it and having that chemistry. My favorite is, it's pretty obvious. It's the fan favorite right now. It's Jim Harbaugh. That's my personal favorite right now. I mean, I think that he is the right coach to build it within the trenches. And as far as just a tough physical, coach, and he's also corny. He's probably one of the few coaches that can also be able to, at least understand Russ and maybe some of his quirkiness. But I mean, he's tough as nails as far as a coach. And when you have a coach, and Frank Reich is probably the same way, but I mean, like when you have a coach that I'll get there eventually. And when you have a coach that is like a trench warfare coach that can build it from the offensive line, I mean, like I think that's really appealing to me. I mean, especially for the Broncos offensive line that has been battered and bruised, especially in 2022. You need to be able to build that offensive line up.
And I think you need a coach that's going to be that's not going to kowtow to Russ at this point. And how good was Nick on the fly explaining to Russ that the the gravy train was over? That was unbelievable.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Raider Zach says, if I were you guys, I'd be over Sean Payton. I'm assuming Frank Reich or Jim, Jim Caldwell. Any of those three would be a home run, would stabilize your offense and go along with defense. Frank is a great coach. I still don't understand the hate for Dan Quinn. Why do people not like Dan Quinn?
I don't think anyone dislikes Dan Quinn. What I like about my favorite thing about Dan Quinn is he delegates. Like he's not. That was the biggest thing, is that Hackett wanted to do it all himself and wanted to be the guy, and Quinn has shown that he has these coordinators, these other coaches, and he delegates, and they coach that part, and they take it. And he does have that CEO kind of mentality that Penner had discussed.
So Kamani wants to know, you would not give Clint Kubiak a chance at offensive coordinator or head coach?
Sound like
what are you talking about?
I'm sure they would have said his name as well during the presser.
Yeah. Maybe Gary Kubiak.
Well, and even if you're going like, even if he's talking like offensive coordinator, I still don't know if you bring Clint Kubiak back as offensive coordinator, because
it just depends.
Russ still hasn't shown anything under Clint.
It just depends on the person's idea for staff. I will say though, I know I tweeted it out. The Stanford connection at least has me puzzling about the idea of David Shaw being on the staff because of the Stanford connection. I know he resigned from Stanford, and say Jim Harbaugh is on the staff. I mean, that would be, pretty interesting as far as having, Shaw be on the staff in some capacity. I don't know what that would be, but Shaw being there would be interesting.
Last question. Kamani wants to know if we draft a running back, and do we keep our wide receiver crew? Like all of our wide receivers, or like the coaching staff? Because the coaching staff, I don't think so. Wide receivers, I think, is Hamler's contract up, or does he still have another year?
I think a receiver is traded this offseason. I would bet that we at least trade one. I don't know. I think that it would either between the three. I think that Patrick is going to be the most safe one because I don't know what you're going to get for him, and he's coming off an ACL. KJ, from what I've heard, is agent is trying to get him out of there. Jerry Jeudy seems to be booming right now. So do you take that as high value and trade that away, or do you or do you keep him as your wide receiver one, as like that your staple at wide receiver?
His 5th-year option is $12 million.
Yeah, and then
yeah,
I think Sutton is more of your boomer bust guy right now. Like he's not very consistent at the moment. Like there's some games where he's boom, but there's a lot where he doesn't do much.
He has 1 touchdown catch this year.
Yeah.
I would actually say if you're looking at that wide receiver room, you're building your wide receiver one room around Jerry Jeudy, and you're going with that. Because I mean, and for as much as a down year as it's been for this Denver Broncos offense, there has been a guy that has remained the most consistent and performed at a very high level. And the offensive player this year for the Denver Broncos is unquestionably Jerry Jeudy. I can't talk today. But yes, so squirkling.
So Marcus, I thought of you last night. I was looking at a mock draft, and the Ravens were picking right before us in that particular one, and they got Bijan. I was like, no.
There are quite a few running backs I like in this draft. I think there's plenty of options. Also in free agency, I fully expect them to try to bring Latavius back as some sort of bridge for it, and then draft another, and then just have.
Do you think it's a possibility, Marcus? They double up. I mean, so like if you're looking at it, for running backs. So I mean, like, because let's just say they go out and sign a running back and then draft one. Like, do you
if it's BPA, if it's best player available at a certain point in the draft, like if it's higher, if it's plug. If it's
we were gonna get to that. How dare you?
Yeah, because I mocked earlier and I traded back into the second round and somehow Bijan was still there. If that's a thing, you're taking Bijan. And then potentially later on, like deeper in the draft, you might get another if you could trade back multiple more times to get to really compound those picks. I could see it maybe. I really think we're going to be super O-line heavy this year.
Yeah. This is kind of going a little bit deeper into that. But let's say we're at the 24th, 25th, 26th pick. Bijan's not available. There's no tackle that's worth that high of a pick. Is there a center or a guard that's worth that, or is it worth more to trade back and draft somebody more into the second or the end of the first?
Yeah. I think they're cool. I like some centers a little down, unless John Michael Schmitz out of Minnesota is there, who I really like. I think that's an option. Other than that, I think a little further down. For your centers like Avila, Forsyth.
So ideally, you would trade back, is what you're.
Yeah. I first of all, there are not a lot of players that I think are going to be there day one that I like enough in the first round. I would try that I value higher than trying to get more picks. So I would most likely trade back. That's what I think the Broncos will do because one, George Payton likes his picks. Two, I just don't value as much.
So we're looking at a lot of money being thrown around in free agency to try to fill this team out.
I think that's what you try to do. I think a lot of the times free agency is you fill your like everybody. Everybody has this idea that you try and fill your holes in free agency or in the NFL draft. You don't. You shouldn't expect your rookies to be your starters unless they are top 5, top 10. Then maybe. You really want to try to fill your team with veterans that can at least be serviceable, and then hope your draft goes well, and maybe those rookies can step up during training camp where you're like, oh, cool. Well, you're going to start here. Same with deeper picks that like maybe down, during the season or maybe the next season they step into that role. But you never draft for. That's why I say you never draft specifically for need. When people come at me for like mock drafts, like, no, you should have taken a tackle with that number 1 overall pick, or not number 1 overall, but your first round pick. It's like, it depends on what player's there. I'm not going to reach on some tackle that I don't value at this position. So,
So what I mean by that is Denver going to be more of a player on high valued free agents? Like, for example, are we going to go after a backup quarterback that we got to pay a little bit more money so that we have an option in case Russ isn't this? Or do we go after a high value wide receiver or a high value running back more as a starter day one than a fill in?
I think a lot of those high value players will. I mean, there's not a ton of them. There's some decent names out there on the offensive line, but it really depends on Penner. We haven't got to see him during an off season yet. I'm very interested to see, because we don't see his tendencies yet. We don't know.
Yeah.
So we don't know if he's just going to go out there and just throw money down on the table, or if he's going to be frugal.
OBJ says, "Come on."
I don't know. That's pretty unlikely.
The question at this point is, would OBJ even want to come to Denver? I'm not saying it's not a desirable location. I'm just saying, when you already have a Super Bowl under your belt, you can pick and choose where you want to go. It's not like a desperate
it's Dallas or bust. I think he's going to Dallas. I don't think there's
Dallas or Buffalo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Raiders, Zach. Let's be honest. Your wide receiver production is down simply on Wilson missing wide open guys. Fact. Not looking at entire side of the field at times. Fact. Sutton is a good wide receiver. I think it'd be a mistake to let him go. We've touted Cortland Sutton for years, but who's the better wide receiver, Jerry Jeudy or Cortland Sutton?
I mean, Cortland Sutton has been the better wide receiver. Jerry Jeudy has been all potential, and now it seems to be coming together.
Yeah.
So that's what I think it is. So now Broncos fans are kind of playing the hot hand. I do think Sutton is better than what he has shown this year, because Russell has been booty garbage. And that doesn't help your receivers. And I think Russell now has a new favorite in Jerry Jeudy, because he's realizing, holy crap, Jerry Jeudy gets insanely open. Let's give it to him, and he makes me look good.
And let's face it, Raiders Act does have some credibility with that, because he does watch Derek Carr. So
Zing.
A question that I don't know if we can answer, but that I want to say it was the last interception that Wilson threw, where he could have either ran or thrown it to the left.
Yeah.
Sutton was on the right and he bombed it, and Sutton was like, and then got like, was he frustrated because Sutton didn't get the ball and he was open there for a little bit? Was he frustrated because Wilson didn't run?
Should have run.
Like, why was he frustrated?
I'm sure it's the first point.
Because he didn't get the ball thrown to him?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he was open. I know that technically, I think it was the throw to Dulcich.
Was it Brandon Johnson on the left that was open too, or was that Dulcich?
I don't know, but I think he bombed it to Dulcich, and it was overthrown. I don't know. Like, as a wide receiver, you want the ball. You see yourself open. He was probably already frustrated. You need a first down. He's standing beyond the first down marker. You know, I get the frustration, but Russ takes the deep ball like he always does. So
So obviously today's show has gone a little bit longer than normal because there's a lot of stuff to talk about, and I was trying to drag it out because this is Boggins' last show before he goes on a hiatus. He's abandoning us for like 6 months. He says he'll be back, and I'm going to hold him to it. He's not allowed to leave ever. So we do want to wish him good luck. I know that you're going to be busy. I know you're going to be busy in the off season. He's also got the BPA show, which is starting January 13th, right? 19th, 13th?
Yeah.
Did I get that right?
Yeah, sure. One of the other.
One of those is
yeah.
The BPA show, you can find them on Twitter. They're going to be up on YouTube as well. So go make sure you check them out. We want to thank everybody so much for joining us on the show. Nick Ferguson especially. Always love it when he's on the show. Check out our other shows. We got shows Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, and then Sunday for the Broncos games. We're going to be starting a live stream on Saturday for the Avalanche games. So check that out as well. And we will talk to all of you later. Good luck. Goodbye. Whatever. Bye.